All right, welcome. I am Mike Gastin, and this is The Currency. I'm glad to have you guys along. Welcome. This is episode number 54. It is a beautiful, sunny, gorgeous Sunday afternoon here in the United States. I'm on the East Coast. It's about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm watching some of you guys chat in the comments here. Ahmed the Pro says it's at 45 degrees Celsius in the United Arab Emirates. My goodness. It's going to get up to about, I think, 90 degrees Fahrenheit here in the U.S. We measure our temperature in screaming bald eagles. I don't know the Celsius equivalent. I guess I could do the math, but I think it's probably in the 30s here Celsius. So pleasant day. Guys, I'm glad to have you guys along. Today we're going to talk about the unbranding of the Washington Redskins. Should be an interesting conversation. Before we get into that, I want to just give a few shout outs here. I see some folks in the chat. I've got Medusa's World of Stone, welcome. Unity ESC, formerly known as Saba, welcome. Also Pauline Weinberger in the house. And I see George in the comments. Welcome, George. And Ahmed the Pro mentioned you just a moment ago. Guys, glad to have you along. Great crowd to start out today, and really excited to have you guys here. Boy, it's just been kind of a crazy week, and I feel like I say that every time I launch the podcast. Every time I launch into one of these live streams and record the podcast, I'm like, boy, it was a crazy week. But there's a lot of things going on. I was just looking in the news today before we get into our topic, and I don't know if you guys saw, but a few weeks ago, or maybe even longer than that, Apple came out and said, yeah, we're going to start developing our own processors. You know, they used to use a Motorola processor back in the day, the early days, and then they shifted over to Intel. And now they're saying we're going to be ditching Intel processors at some point. We're going to be going with our own. They're going to build their own processors. And I saw that Intel just recently had this public announcement. I think they had a call with their CEO with investors saying that Intel might stop manufacturing of its own processors. They might start to outsource its processor manufacturing. Now, the current CEO used to be the CFO, the Chief Financial Officer, and he took over a while back. I don't know how long he's been at the helm, but that just sounds like a cost-cutting decision. The one thing about Intel is that they differentiated because they both had the brand and they made their own chips. They weren't outsourcing, and so they could control that. And I'm wondering if Intel just has not invested in its infrastructure and its ability. It struggled to get newer technology out on time, and I'm just wondering if they're taking a hit. Like if Apple's going to pull its business, they're struggling. They haven't invested in their infrastructure. They're thinking maybe they're going to outsource. But it's just interesting to watch. You know, there's so much in the news that overshadows these amazing kind of dynamics and trends that are happening. You know, it's easy to get caught up in the latest riot. We talk about this stuff all the time. Or, you know, what has the Orange Man done or said lately? Or, you know, what's the latest on coronavirus? But there's so much going on in the world, and it's just fascinating to take a look at some of that stuff. But yeah, that news with Intel, and their stock took a huge hit. Now, there's some talks that they're going to go to this Taiwanese chip maker who kind of is the mothership chip maker for everybody else. And but then they're saying, well, they might just outsource because these guys, I forget the name of the company, but it's in Taiwan, and they're really kind of at the forefront. They make the AMD chips and all that jazz. But they're saying like it might be hard for Intel to get this Taiwanese manufacturer to work with them, because if they're supplying all of Intel's competitors and Intel says, well, we want you to make for us, I think those competitors say, wait a minute, we don't want Intel as part of this happy family here. They're the bad guy. That's why we come to you. So it'd be very interesting to see where this thing shakes out. But just some amazing things going on in the news. A quick hi to Jordy Fitzgerald. Jordy, thank you for joining us today. Jordy says he's so jealous of my beard style. Jordy, I have to guess you probably have a full head of hair, so we'll just call it even. I don't know if you do or not, but yeah, thanks. It's pretty easy to get this style. You just have to get old and gray, and then just let this thing grow a little bit. Trust me, Jordy, there's no rush to have a gray beard. But thank you. I'm glad you're here, and I appreciate the compliment. Very kind of you. So before we get too deep into this, for folks that are live, you know that this podcast happens live on YouTube once a week. If you're listening to this, maybe later on in the week, you're listening on Apple, iTunes, Apple Podcasts, you're listening on Spotify. Please know you can join the gang. Just go to YouTube, look for Mike Gastin, that's Gastin. Subscribe to my channel, and you'll get notified when this thing is going to go live, and you can jump in and have some fun. Typically what we do, and one of the benefits to being live is we'll sit and do the podcast, we'll talk about the topic, and then I'll end the podcast, but we'll sit and do Q&A. Last time we did 2 hours. We did 40 some odd, 50 minutes of the podcast, and then we sat for over an hour, and we just did Q&A. We had conversations. And I got to tell you guys, it was so much fun for me. I finished these live streams, finished this podcast, and I'm so energized. I'm exhausted at the same time. I mean, 2 hours. When I stood up, my legs hardly worked. Literally, I'm not exaggerating. They hardly worked, but a lot of fun. And I love the back and forth. I love the commentary, the questions, the conversations. Of course, I had to turn the air conditioner off, to fire this up so that the audio wasn't a mess. And you can imagine after 2 hours and then with a 90+ degree day outside, I was ready for an ice cold shower. But guys, thanks for joining me today. So let's talk a little bit about the Washington Redskins. Now, folks in the audience now, a lot of folks I know watch and listen to this show from all over the world, but you're probably aware, of American football. Not that American football. See, this is the one thing Americans don't know. I think we're starting to learn this, but when most of the world talks football, they're talking about soccer. And I'm going to get a lot of hate mail for this, but I actually think that soccer is way better. Pauline's saying she's going to go enjoy the beach with her family, but just wanted to say hi. Hey, Pauline, thanks for joining us. You can always catch it after the fact, but it was good to see you here. Yes, the beach always trumps the podcast. I will not take issue with that, so enjoy. But I will say that American football is not as good as football, as soccer. I love watching soccer. And I kind of miss it. I haven't watched soccer in a while. As a matter of fact, I used to have, Sling TV, I want to say. Had a package so that I could watch Barcelona and La Liga. A lot of fun to watch those matches. And one of the things I like about, and this is for my American audience, one of the things I like about soccer is it's uninterrupted. So with American football, almost everything is a set play. The clock, you set up in formation, the clock ticks down, you snap the ball, and there's some type of play. You're either going to run the ball, kick the ball, pass the ball, and then once you're tackled, the play's over. Once you're brought down or the ball goes out of bounds, that's it. And then you just keep doing these set plays. And and that's okay, but there's a certain cadence to the game. There's a lot of tension, a lot of stress, like through the match the whole time. And the other problem is between these set plays, you just get bombarded with advertisements. And if you're used to watching American football, you don't see it. Like if you grew up watching it, you don't typically notice it because you've been kind of acclimatized to it. But between every play, there's some type of ad, there's graphics, there's noises. This is brought to you by, and hey, our sponsors over here, and just a lot of commercialization of American football. Now, here's the thing: like soccer, European, Brazilian, South American, soccer all over the world, also very commercialized. I mean, these are billion-dollar teams. Some of these big teams are massive. Barcelona, Real Madrid, Liverpool. These are big teams with big money, but when you watch the match, it's 2 45-minute halves, and they're uninterrupted. I mean, most of it is free flowing. Now, if there's a foul or something, there's some foul committed, then there's a set play because there might be a free kick or something like that, a penalty kick, a throw in. But the play just keeps happening. And if the guy gets tackled, like a slide tackle, you take him out, or the ball changes hands, or whatever, it just keeps going. And I kind of love that. Now, here's the thing. People go, it's so boring and it takes so forever and they don't score that much. But this is the one thing I kind of like. It's kind of like a slow pot on the simmer. Like it starts out, and each match can have a different energy to it. Some of them are kind of boring and conservative, and some are aggressive from the first whistle. But it kind of builds up so that when you do get a goal, it's like explosive. It's just like, you're screaming. So anyway, that's me. I'm not trying to dog American football. I'm just saying stylistically and entertainment value, I think that European and international football, I guess I should call it that, is really great. And rugby's another contender in there. Rugby doesn't have as many set plays. It's a lot faster paced, a lot rougher, more physical, obviously, than soccer. But the play keeps going. There are some set plays, but not as much as American football. So anyway, that's a little side message. And by the way, my little brother Brian is in the house. Commercials are just snack breaks, no doubt, B. See, it's designed for your maximum submarine sandwich pleasure. But the Washington Redskins is a football team in the American NFL, National Football League. They're based in Washington, D.C. Actually, I have to say, my little brother, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, but I believed that the Washington Redskins, is your favorite team. I remember you were a big fan of John Riggins, and the Redskins, I think, won the Super Bowl at least once. By the way, welcome to Oluwafemi Aki Naomi. I don't think I said that 100% right, but welcome. Glad to have you along. He says he missed the past two chats, but he said bug fan, but I think he meant big fan. Yes, he meant big fan. From Nigeria. My friend, welcome. It's so great to have you. You know, I used to live south of you, Oluwafemi. Boy, if I could only speak. I used to live south of you. I used to live in Cape Town, South Africa. Lived in South Africa for a couple of years and I visited there quite often. Never been to Nigeria, but I've met some pretty cool Nigerian people that live here. So welcome. Glad to have you along. So the Washington Redskins. So here's the thing. They've had some pressure for years. For years, people have been saying, look, this name is racist. This name is not kind. It's not kind to American Indians. Hold on one second here. I keep doing this. I got to see what Brian's saying. He said, when I did watch, I was definitely a Redskins fan. So you're saying you don't really watch football that much anymore, but when you did, you were a Redskins fan. And by the way, Brian and I grew up in Buffalo Bills country in Rochester, New York. Oluwafemi says, my English name is Joseph. You almost lost your tooth there. Thank you so much. Thank you. I deserve that. I definitely deserve that. I did almost lose my tooth there. Yeah, thank you, Joseph. So the Redskins have been under pressure for a long time. For those that don't know, and I don't know anybody that doesn't know, but Redskin is kind of a slang. So if you grew up as a kid here in the U.S., you might watch cowboy and Indians movies about cowboys taking over the Wild West. You know, America settled, the Europeans, the Americans kind of went from the East Coast and worked their way westward. And there's all kinds of stories of wagon trains and pioneers and settlements and kind of battles between the pioneers and the Indians. Also, a lot of stories of the Indians and the pioneers working together. Indian tribes with war with each other. There isn't just one Indian group in the U.S. There are many, many different tribes. Just the state that I'm in, New York, there were 7 nations. The 7 nations, and then also like the Iroquois and these different, the Mohicans, and then you had a warring group, the Algonquins, that would fight with these guys that came up from the Florida, south of the country. So you've got all these different tribes in the U.S., and they were pretty nomadic. They had areas that they stayed in, but they would move around a lot depending on weather and game and seasons and so on, and food supplies. So, you know, in the Washington, D.C. area, you've got this team that's named the Redskins. And with cowboys and Indians and all that kind of stuff, you'd refer to the Indians as the Redskins because, you know, they were the red men. So you had the white men, the black men, the brown men, the yellow men, the Asians, Orientals. And then you had the red men, which were the Indians. Everybody had these different skin tones. I don't know if you know this, but people have different skin tones. Is this something you guys are aware of? So this team, which is about 80 some odd years old, 85 years old, and maybe George can look this up because I don't know the history of where they got the name. Like, why did they choose the Redskins name? So that I can't answer. I should have known that coming in, but I couldn't find it. But the team's about 88 or 85 years old, and they're called the Redskins. And on their helmet, and I had this logo up during the show open, is this kind of Indian brave. The male warriors were referred to as braves. An Indian brave, kind of a bust, a profile of this Indian brave was hair braided and a couple feathers dangling down. And there's been this outrage for a bunch of years, or this at least drive by a bunch of people saying you got to change your name. It's offensive. It's racist. It's inconsiderate. It's hurtful. And the team's owner, Dan Snyder, and Snyder family, but Dan Snyder, he said back in 2013, he said, we'll never change the name. So there's been all this pressure, and he's just come out and said, we'll never change the name. Well, folks, that has changed. That has changed. They are changing the name. And today I want to talk about what they've done. So what happened is they got some pressure. They have a bunch of companies like Nike and FedEx and Pepsi that advertise and sponsor teams like the Redskins. And if you look at the Redskins, their net worth, I want to say, is $3.4 billion. I don't know if they do about $3.4 billion in revenue, or if their net worth is about $3.4 billion. But this is a massive company. If you think of the Redskins as a business, $3.4 billion in revenue. And that's just an outrageous number. It makes them number 7 in the NFL for the most valuable. So that might be their net worth, the $3.4 billion. But this Dan Snyder said, well, we'll never change the name. It's part of our history. Our fans are Redskins. The team were Redskins, and we've got the Indian nations that love us. As a matter of fact, the logo was designed partially by the chairman of the Blackfeet Nation. His name is Walter Blackie Wetzel, Blackie being his nickname. So Walter Wetzel goes by Blackie Wetzel. He was the chair of the Blackfeet Nation. He helped us design, he gave us input on this logo. Now, to me, that was probably a little bit of a positioning thing. Like, they were smart and said, look, we know we're going to get trouble. This is back when they were redoing their logo. Let's get the Indian Nation involved so that we can say, hey, the Indian Nation helped us. Same thing happened with the Land O'Lakes woman on the Land O'Lakes, butter packaging. It was also supposedly designed and painted, illustrated by a Native American, but they've taken that off. So let's see here. Yeah, so George is saying Forbes lists as the NFL's 7th most valuable franchise at $3.4 billion. So that's right. I had it right. Look at that. Yeah, I'm just wondering, George, where did the name the Redskins originate? So that's a little bit of background. We're going to call George Jamie. Last show we called him Jamie after Jamie on the Joe Rogan podcast because George was looking up everything, kind of like Rogan's info man Jamie, who kind of runs the back end of the show. George is doing a phenomenal job, and I was having trouble collecting my thoughts for some reason. Seems to be a trend lately. Maybe that goes back to Jordy Fitzgerald's comment about the beard. I think maybe along with a good-looking gray beard comes a struggling cognition. Let's hope that's not the case. I'm too young for that. So let's talk for a minute about wrap up this kind of background. So that was the background, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on the background. I just want to cue it up. So what the team did is they made an announcement, I want to say on July 3rd, the day before Independence Day, and said, hey, we don't have the name yet, but we're changing our name. And wait, it's going to be great. We're going to change the name. We're listening to people. We understand. And it's time for us to make a change. We're going to come out with a new brand. It's going to be amazing. They kind of pumped it up a little bit. They kind of said, it's going to be awesome. I don't know if you guys ever saw this episode of The Office, but there was one episode of The Office where Michael had promised The Office some special surprise. Oh, wait, it's going to be great. End of the day today, I'm going to have this great surprise. And the fact is, he didn't even have a surprise in mind. He was just kind of throwing something out there to cover his rear end on another issue. So he makes this promise. He's got everybody talking about it. And all throughout that episode, he's trying to come up with something. He's like, what's it going to be? But he keeps pumping it the whole time. It's going to be great. You're going to love it. Kind of like Trump does. It's going to be beautiful. You're going to love it. So anyways, at the end of the show, he can't figure out what to do. And so he goes out and he gets ice cream sandwiches. And he comes back with a box of ice cream sandwiches, of 50 cent a piece ice cream sandwiches, and then starts handing them around to all the office. And they're kind of like, you're kidding me. This is what you had us all excited about? This is ridiculous. Like, they were so upset. And I kind of feel like that's what the Washington Redskins have done to themselves, because they came out at July 3rd, made this big announcement. We're going to rechange. We're going to rebrand. We're going to change the name. We're going to get rid of this kind of past and start something fresh. And you're going to love it. It's going to be great. And what they came out with is the following. They're calling themselves the Washington Football Team. That's right, the Washington Football Team. The Washington Football Team, which is ridiculous. The Washington Football Team. Like, that's like saying, like, if you go, hey, Mike, what kind of car do you drive? And it's like, I drive the car with 4 wheels. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. You too can have the car with 4 wheels. Hurry down to your dealer and get your car with 4 wheels. It's the Washington Football Team. Now, here's what they're doing. They're doing this because they can't come up with a name. I think they're stuck. They don't know what to do. And so they've come back and said, look, for now, we're just going to get rid of this racist name, this terribly offensive name. And we're going to call ourselves temporarily the Washington football team until we can come up with something better. Until we can come up with something better, which to me is just ridiculous. It's like, you got to be kidding me. You've got to be kidding me. So why am I stunned by this? Why do I think that this is ridiculous? Why do I think that this is unacceptable? Isn't it good enough that they're doing something? Isn't it good that they're finally breaking with the past? Isn't it good that they're addressing this racist issue that they've had all along? Isn't it good that they're finally taking into consideration where the world is today, where society is, and where the sensibilities and the understanding and the values of today's culture are? Isn't it good enough that they're finally listening to the fans? Now, a lot of fans don't want them to change, but there are a bunch of fans that say, yeah, it's time to change. Here's the thing. I don't have an issue with them changing. As a matter of fact, I mean, Redskins is derogatory. I'm not going to say it's not. I'm not going to sit and defend it and go, for me, this isn't like a left versus right issue. This isn't like if you're on the right, you can't give any ground, even if you're wrong. And if, it's just not, it's not a good name. I mean, it just is what it is. I don't care if it's got historical value. I don't care if it's, imbued with all this value. You've got brand equity. I don't care if it's going to cost you a lot of money to change it. The fact of the matter is the Washington Redskins is a little racist. Now, I'm not offended by it, but I'm not American Indian. I don't find it extremely onerous or odious. This isn't like you go, oh, I just hate, I'm embarrassed to even say it. I'm embarrassed to hear anybody talk about it. Those fans should be ashamed of themselves. No. But it is a derogatory name. Redskins, a derogatory name. Now, this logo was supposedly designed by this Blackie Wetzel. Now, he's part of the Blackfeet Nation. I mean, if it was like the Washington Blackfeet, you're still going to get people screaming, oh, that's appropriation, that's cultural appropriation. But if it was like recognizing the legitimate name of a nation, and here's the thing about an Indian mascot. The Indians were viewed as strong and powerful and fearful. Not that they were fearful, but we feared the Indians. They were scary. They were, these marauders. They were savages. And I know savage. That's not kind to call someone a savage. But if you're talking about a sport team, you're not going to say we're the Washington Tinkerbells. Oh, someone just gave me a downvote. Oh, give me a break. I don't know who just gave me a downvote, but give me a break. This hurts your feelings so bad. Boo-hoo. But you're not going to go hit the pitch as the Washington Tinkerbells. You're not going to go hit the pitch as the Washington watercolorists. You know what I'm saying? You're not going to say we're the Washington Knitting Club. Like, it's just not scary. It's just not scary. So you want to come out with a mascot that's intimidating, that's strong, that communicates some kind of fierceness. And look, the Indians of lore, that's what they were. They were fierce. They were formidable opponents. They were skillful in combat and battle, hand to hand. They were brutal. If you lost to them, not only did they kill you, but they scalped you. You know what I mean? It's like they were terrifying in many ways. And so for a football team, any sporting team, to come out with a name that's terrifying, the Sharks, the Jaguars, I mean, it makes so much sense. So I kind of see why, they chose a name like that. And so to say something like the Mohawks, the Mohicans, the Cherokees, one of these names that's not derogatory, but Redskins a little derogatory. Okay, so you want to change it. Here's the issue that I have. The issue isn't that they want to change it. I'm not going to sit and argue and fight that they shouldn't change it. Who cares? Change your name. Companies do that all the time. It's a multi-billion dollar business. But here's the thing. These guys knew for a decade at least, that they were going to have to face this day. Now forget this as a sporting team. Think of this as a business. This is a $3.7 billion company. And the product that it sells is entertainment. It sells entertainment. And it sells it on the big screen. I mean, football in America is larger than life. You can't watch television in the fall without seeing some American football. I mean, football fans, it's just a crazy big sport in the US. It's huge. The NFL is massive. Some of the biggest stadiums in the world are football stadiums in America. So you knew this thing was coming, and you've got billions of dollars at your disposal. You can't tell me you didn't figure out one of two things. On one hand, if your owner's saying we'll never change it, you didn't have a plan to resist the turning tide over time. You couldn't see that society was changing. You couldn't see that successive generations were becoming more and more sensitive to these kinds of things, more and more easily offended by them, and so on. You couldn't see that and come up with a plan to say, how are we going to spin this? How are we going to keep this name? If we're saying we're not going to change it, how are we going to keep it in the face of all opposition? And on the other hand, if you're like, look, maybe we should think about changing it. You had at least a decade. You had at least a decade, 10 years, to figure out what to do. And you squandered it. You didn't do it, which to me is just stupid. You had all this time to come up with a strategy, all this time to figure out what to do. Now, maybe it's a matter of you just have this owner that's so belligerent that he's like, I'll never change it. And then the employees are like, we're not even allowed to consider changing it, because if the boss hears that we're even coming up with a strategy, he'll just start firing people. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Dan Snyder's like. You know, these team owners can be like little Caesars, if you will, little Hitlers, little megalomaniacs running around. Not all of them, but I mean, you know, you're running a $3.7 billion organization. I think you're believing your own publicity. I think you don't have a problem kicking a little butt here and there when you feel you need to. I'm sure some of these people are great to work with and work for, but I don't know what Dan Snyder's like. So it may just been the culture's like, look, you may not even consider touching this thing. But if it's me, I'm thinking, why would you not get ready a decade in advance and say, look, we can see the changing tide. You can't tell me they don't have some type of analyst on the team that's looking, some type of strategic planner on the team that's looking out and saying, what are the changing, even a marketing person on the team is going to tell you, hey, guys, I'm looking at trends. I've got access to all kinds of data. I'm looking at trends in society, and I don't think this name, Redskin, is going to be sustainable. I love the Redskin name. Like, I'm a team player, guys. I'm not hostile to it, but I'm just saying if we want to keep the revenue flowing, we're going to have to deal with this name at some point. You can't tell me that nobody had that conversation, that nobody had the wherewithal to think about that. Nobody said, let's do a little bit of planning. There wasn't an envelope somewhere, a packet somewhere ready for this day that if things happen, they could throw the switch, or at least they had a narrative. They have nothing. They came out on July 3rd and said, we're going to change the name. Then they come out a couple days ago and they're like, we can't really they didn't, this in so many words, we really can't come up with a name, so we're just going to call ourselves the Washington football team until we can figure it out. Like, it's just stunning to me that a $3.4 billion company can't come up with a brand change. It just blows my mind. It really does. I don't know if you can tell, but it blows my mind. And this is what's so outstanding to me. This, not that they changed it or that they didn't change it, not that Redskin is offensive or isn't offensive. I don't care about all that stuff. I honestly don't. But from a strategic perspective, from a marketing perspective, from a business perspective, and from a branding perspective, why would you not figure that stuff out ahead of time? Why would you not deal with that? I'm kind of left speechless. It doesn't make sense to me. I think this translates to our businesses. I think it translates to our companies, the things that we're working on. Not that we have to be politically correct. Not that we have to always be looking out to keep everybody happy. But that we should be thinking about, not so much just about our brands, but we should be thinking about the things that are out on the horizon and be preparing for them as best we can. There's things that you can't prepare for. And I'm not one that's like, look, strategic. I'm not huge on lots of strategic planning. I think coming up with a strategy is critical. But strategic planning, taking this like really broken down bit by bit control system and placing it on the company and then dictating and controlling it as it goes along is not always good, because the environment around you changes faster than the planning system can allow you to respond to. But having a strategy, how are we going to go to market? What's going to be our strategy? What are we going to do? What are we choosing not to do? I think that's important to have. And I think for all of us, we have the ability to look out on the horizon. You had a friend who was a fighter pilot. Back when we lived in South Africa, he was a fighter pilot in the South African Defense Force, in the Air Force. And I got to watch him do some expositions. They were doing, it was the anniversary. They were going around the country doing different shows, and they were amazing. We'd sit just behind chain link fence. This is the great thing about Africa. In America, you have these amazing displays like the Blue Angels that will thunder around and do aerial acrobatics and that type of stuff. But when you go to a South African, back in the day, when you went to a South African air show, it was the Air Force, you sat behind a chain link fence, and they had stuff like old Jeeps and stuff out in the bush, just off in the distance, and they just fly over and blow stuff up. They'd fly over and fire their 50 millimeter cannons. They'd drop bombs. It was nuts. It was nuts. I was sitting there with my wife and 2 children. My daughter wasn't born at the time. The boys were just little, trying to cover their ears. We didn't realize how loud it was going to be, covering their ears, and just watching these planes fly and just blow stuff up. But the jet that my buddy flew was not as advanced as the United States technology at the time. So he was not able to fly by wire. So he had to fly with a map in his lap, and at night, if they're doing bombing runs at night, with a flashlight in his mouth, one hand on the joystick, looking at the map and looking at his terrain and figuring out where he was for a run. And he said to me, one of the things you learn very early as a pilot, you have to be this way, is you can't be thinking about where you are. You have to be thinking miles out, because you're going so fast. You're going so fast that you have to be thinking you have to be projecting forward, because as soon as you think about, where you are, you've already passed it. You have to be thinking so far ahead. And so for these pilots that weren't able to fly by wire like modern pilots can, they were still in jets. I mean, these things were going fast, but they were having to not only coordinate thinking further out, but also looking at their maps. I mean, there's just so much. And at the same time, probably keeping an eye out for the enemy. So it's really arduous. But I think about a team like the Washington football team, currently, formerly known as the Washington Redskins. Who's on that team thinking further out? Or have they just gotten so big, so fat, so happy, so lazy that they're just doing what they're forced to do only when they have to do it? It's like that lazy teenager. We've all either been one, or we've had one, or we know one. That freaking kid who won't even take out the damn garbage, which until you force them to, and when they do it kicking and screaming, and then when they take it out, they do a crappy job taking it out, hoping that you'll not ask them again. They want to make it so painful for you that you just leave them alone. And I kind of get the feeling like the Washington Redskins, this is like they're unhappy about this. Nike, FedEx, and Pepsi. What happened is Nike, FedEx, and Pepsi, and some companies like them, their investors went to Nike, FedEx, and Pepsi, the respective companies' investors, and said, we want you to stop advertising and sponsoring the Washington Redskins until they change their name. Put pressure on them. So the investors put pressure on the companies that they've invested in and said, we don't want to be involved with these guys anymore. It's wrong. It's morally offensive to us. Now, this had to be a coordinated effort. This just doesn't bubble up on its own. This is something where a bunch of activist investors are trying to get the company to grab it by the nose and get it to do what they want. And it works. It works. Because I would imagine the majority of investors at Pepsi, the majority of investors at Nike and FedEx, they don't care. They don't care about this stuff. It doesn't bother them. But a vocal minority got these companies to then turn around and put pressure on the Washington Redskins and said, if you don't do something, we've got to pull our cash. Now, when you're a $3.4 billion company, you can imagine that if other multi-billion-dollar companies are saying, well, we're done if you don't play ball with us, no pun intended. Well, what's going to happen? Well, they're going to make a change. They don't want to lose that money. They're in it for the money. Dan Snyder's not in it for the football. Dan Snyder's not in it for the bragging rights. Danny Snyder's in it for the cash. That's what this is all about. And don't forget, and this is where the rant begins. We're living in a corporatist society. I don't know if you know what corporatism is. People hear corporatist and they go, yeah, it's a capitalist society, this free market. It's terrible. We should be communists, not corporatists. That misunderstands the word corporatist. Corporatism aligns more with socialism and fascism and totalitarianism than it does free markets. A corporatist society is one where the government and giant corporations are closely tied to one another. Nazi Germany and America back during that whole World War II and post-World War II era was very corporatist. So what would happen is the government would come out and say, we want to pass these edicts and laws. And these giant corporations say, Mr. Government, we'll do it. But in return, we want something from you. And so the government and these big corporations kind of get into this incestuous relationship. And it serves both of them. So what happens is these big corporations, they get all the government contracts, they get all the best tax breaks, they get all the pats on the back, they get all the funds, they get all the resources. And then the government is able to institute a lot of its policies by using these employers, because these big corporations are the big employers. So if they want to put some type of new social program in place or some new tax thing in place, well, Nike can absorb that. Nike's a multi-billion-dollar international business. They can absorb that. They go, sure, yeah, we'll put transgender bathrooms all throughout, no problem. And we'll put all of our employees through re-education processes and sensitivity training. We'll force them to do it. And if they don't do it, they'll lose their job. And the government says, perfect. That way we can get our policies throughout in place and enforced. And it doesn't have to necessarily be the police knocking on your door. It's the HR manager that says, sorry, buddy, you don't fit here anymore. We're going to take your income away from you because you don't play ball, because you're naughty, because you're troglodyte, whatever. You don't fit here anymore. And what ends up happening, though, is the smaller private businesses, the mom and pop businesses, the $10 million companies, the $50 million companies, the $200 million companies, these kind of mid-size and small, $500,000 companies, they get crushed because they cannot afford to put these policies in place. And they don't get the tax breaks. They don't get the preferential treatment. They don't get the government contracts. They don't get the big, move your company to our town and we'll waive your taxes. Amazon gets that stuff, but you and I don't get that. But that's corporatism. Corporatism is when the government and large corporations are working cheek and jowl, hand in glove, when they are in bed together. Because what ends up happening is you see a society where the views and the desires of the state are enforced through big corporations. And big corporations turn around and get all the benefit. And how does that money come into those corporations? Like when a company like Amazon goes into a city and gets a giant tax break, where's that money coming from? Well, the government doesn't make money. Yes, it prints bills and it mints coins, but the government doesn't create wealth. The government takes the wealth that you created through taxation and redistributes it. So check this out. The government taxes some poor slob working in a warehouse and then turns around and takes that poor slob's money and gives it to Jeff Bezos. This is the outrage. And I'm a free market guy. I'm a capitalist. I am not a socialist. I am not for re-engineering society. I'm not a progressive. I'm a conservative, free market guy. But this is an outrage. This is what's happening. And so you see the pressure coming in from Nike, FedEx, and Pepsi. Now, nobody in the government picked up the phone and said, hey, do this. This is a free market force right here. But they're putting pressure on the Washington Redskins. I can't wait until the Buccaneer lobby gets online and takes the Tampa Bay Buccaneers down. Because if I were a Buccaneer, I'd feel kind of offended that they're using my name. Is there a Buccaneer lobby? Is there like a whole Buccaneer subculture? This is like Pirates of the Caribbean, these guys easily offended because you're using the name Buccaneer. Yeah, so this is what's going on. And what's just surprising to me is that Tampa Bay. Now I've been joking about Tampa Bay and I'm confused. The Washington Redskins did not see this coming. How could they not see this coming? I mean, their name was obviously an issue. They knew that their name was an issue. How could they have not seen this coming? And yet, on the other hand, they did nothing. And it's really, really interesting. I love to be a fly in the wall and hear the discussions. So now what they're going to have to do, they've bought themselves time. They've got egg on their face because, one, they've capitulated. Dan Snyder said, we'll never do it. So now they've got egg on their face because they're doing it. That's one. Two, they came out and said, it's going to be great. You're going to love it. And they've come out with this ridiculous placeholder of a name. It's about as vanilla and generic as you can get. And good for them. They're admitting we can't come up with something. And then three, now I wonder, what are they going to come up with? And God help them if they run some type of fan contest. We're going to do a fan contest. I think there is an opportunity for them. I think there's an opportunity for them to come out with something amazing that ties into their history, and there's got to be a way forward that gets them out of the hot water, and at the same time doesn't just throw who they are in the dustbin of history. This is the problem, and this is a consumer good. It's a sports team. It's a consumer good. We consume it. We enjoy it. We get some identity from it. We share some times with friends and family, so on. So there's more going on there than just raw money, but they do create a great product for you and I, all these sports teams in any sporting field. But at the end of the day, it is a business, and they've got to be thoughtful about how to move this thing forward. And I'm concerned about the erasure of history. Yeah, you can say, look, we used to be the Redskins. We realize taste, sensibilities changed. Fine. The name was never meant to be derogatory. The name was always actually in recognition of how fierce and impressive the Blackfeet Nation was, or whatever they want to say, but we understand that the meaning of words change over time. And so we're going to keep our heritage, but we're going to modify our name to be a little bit more acceptable to today's ear. I'm fine with that. Honestly, in Tesla News says they don't need to change their names. I agree. They don't have to. But then I think they have to be willing to say, okay, if we don't change our name and we're going to do this on principle, are we willing to lose money? And I think that's what's going on here. If Nike, FedEx, and Pepsi and others did not apply pressure, they would not be doing this. I mean, this is pretty obvious. They're being forced to do this. And when I say forced, their bank account saying you have to do this, otherwise we're going to lose money. Now, they could take a stand. I mean, that's a legitimate thing for a business to take a stand and say, no, on principle. It's not just that we're stubborn. It's not just that we want to be hateful. We're not racist. We don't have anything against. We love the Indians. We've got a lot of fans that are Indians that are proud of us because we're the Redskins. I mean, you could make that argument. I'm not friends with Indians. I can't sit and tell you, well, I've talked to 30 different people and here's what I've heard. I don't know. But they could make that argument and they might be able to back it up. They might back those claims up. But if they're going to do that, then they need to do this on principle and they need to fight a fight. And this is the thing. They're not fighting a fight. They're just capitulating. So Dan Snyder for a decade told us, we'll never almost a decade. We'll never change the name. And now as soon as he's going to lose some serious money, we're changing that name, baby. That name is gone. Goodbye. But if they're willing to take a hit and say, no, you know what? I don't care if we lose money. We can still run this organization with a smaller bottom line. We get smaller revenue, smaller net worth. We don't have to be seventh. Yes, it's going to be tougher, but we're going to figure out a way forward. And we're going to take a stand. And here's why. They have to have a narrative. They have to have a reason. And that's the issue I think that they're lacking. These teams have brands, and they're kind of relying on the historic loyalty of their fans. And so for a while, I think Dan Snyder and team said, well, we can just rely on this loyalty, but it's really just about the money. At the end of the day, it's about the money, and that's revealed right now. And so for me, if it really is about the money, why did you not, over the last 10 years, have a plan to move forward? If you knew it was about the money, if deep down it was all about the money, and you knew that this brand and this name was going to be problematic for you in the near future, why didn't you develop a plan to move forward? Why didn't you do this on your own steam? And this is the big thing for me. I think people especially, but even companies, you want to be able to live life on your own terms. And living life on your own terms doesn't mean you just resist everything. Sometimes living on your own terms says, I see the future coming. I'm smart enough to see it. And I'm going to change some of my behaviors. I'm going to change some of my positions so that I can thrive and continue to be free going into the future. I don't mean that I'm going to capitulate. I'm just going to please the crowd. But like if Dan Snyder is a Blackfoot Indian and he's like, I'm proud to be a Redskin, then he could just say to the world, screw you guys. I'm not changing. I'm a Redskin. But this is a huge corporation. It's a huge corporation, and it's all about the money. And I don't blame them for that. There's nothing wrong with it being about the money. I don't think that that's necessarily bad, because the free market does align interests. If he wants to make money, and the world around him is saying, well, we don't want you making money that way. We'd prefer you get rid of this name and use a different kind of name that doesn't offend everybody. I'm fine with that. Like, I don't have an issue. But then don't be caught flat-footed. I understand we have riots. We've got some race issues going on. But the whole Redskins discussion, that's been going on for 10 years plus. It's been going on for a long time. It's way more than 10 years, but it's been kind of hot for 10 years. How could they not sit and say, we've got to figure out how to bridge this gap, how to ford this gulf so that we can get to the other side on our own terms, on our own schedule, and we can come up with a name that's great, and we can actually manage and control the way it's rolled out. Right now, they look stupid. They're sitting there, I can't even say the phrase, but they're sitting there with their hands in their pockets, looking like idiots, when they could have been heroes. And yes, they would have upset their fans. It would have not been good, but they had 10 years. They could have had a whole rollout plan. They could have had all kinds of support. They could have been strategic about it. They could have been really smart and phased this thing out and phased in a new name. It could have been a shift, a modify. They could have actually been a case study. The Washington Redskins could have been a case study on how to do it right. And they boned it. They freaking fumbled the ball. They had the perfect opportunity. That's one of the things when you're running a business, or just when you're a professional, when you're running a business and you're faced with a problem, this is your opportunity to shine. When you've got something that's bad or flawed or you missed the deadline or you screwed something up or there's a problem, when you fix that problem, it actually puts you in a stronger place than if you never had the problem. And they've totally fumbled. They had a great opportunity to demonstrate to the world what kind of organization that they are. And they didn't deliver. They just sat and waited and said, we'll never change, and waited until the mob won. And now they're capitulating because they don't want to lose the money. And now they look stupid. They look stupid. And so I think, I think there's still time. I'm not saying like they can't come out now with a good name. They can come out with a great name and a lot of this will be forgotten. But I think this is a case study. This is a case study for how not to handle a business, how not to look at the future. It's not like they couldn't divine this. Yes, we didn't know that George Floyd was going to be murdered. We didn't know that cities were going to burn. We didn't know that statues were going to be toppled. We didn't know that a race war was brewing on the horizon. We didn't know that necessarily. But you could have seen all through President Obama's administration the widening gulf between the races. You could have seen it. Like he took office, and it just seemed like there was more unhappiness between the races, and it just grew. He really, I don't know if he tried to, but let's pretend he tried to unite the races. He really struggled to do that. If anything, he was more of a divider than a uniter. Now, we can get into why that is, et cetera. I don't really care about all that. But the point being, if you're at the headquarters of the Washington Redskins and you can't see where society's going, I mean, I'm sorry. There's certain things you just can't divine. But if you can't see this, then I'm sorry. Like you don't deserve your job. I know whose job it was, but you don't deserve your job. Someone needs to tell Dan Snyder the truth. Someone should have been telling him years ago, hey, Dan, why don't we get ahead of this thing? Why don't we at least explore? You don't have to approve it. You don't have to accept anything. Give me a small budget. Just give me a little budget to do some exploration, play with some ideas, just do some creative stuff. Let me just play around a little bit. I'll keep it. It'll be black box, skunk works all the way. No one will know about it. And let's put a little plan together, and we can just park it on the back shelf for a while. And if we need it, we pull it off. And if we don't, hey, c'est la vie. But that's not what they did. And so now they're sitting here kind of stuck with this embarrassed look on their face because they are the Washington football team. Guys, that's it for the podcast today. If you haven't done so already, do me a favor and subscribe. Those of you on the live stream, please stick around because I'd love to have a little Q&A. We'll keep it going. But for the listeners on Spotify, on Apple, and on Google, and Stitcher, and so on, I'm grateful that you guys joined me today. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe. You can do that by going to anywhere that fine podcasts are provided, your favorite platform, and look for The Currency. And hit that subscribe button. I'd be grateful. If you want to get in touch with me, you can hit my website. It's MikeGastin, GASTIN.com. There's a contact form there. You can follow me on the social medias. You can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can hit me up on Instagram, even Twitter. I love to have conversations with my audience. But I'm grateful to have you along, and I hope that this discussion was useful to you. So, guys, I love you all, and I'll catch you in the next episode. All right, so my friends here on YouTube, well, let's take this a little further. Let's go a little longer if you guys want to hang out for a couple minutes. I really think this is interesting. I'm just going to skim through some of the comments that were happening. Let's see here. So Brian says, could they be waiting to reveal the name when it would be the most profitable, aka stores open and football on the TV? They could. I mean, they could, but they came out with this big announcement on July 3rd. So it just seems like they're stuck. Like for me, what I'm inferring from this is they're stuck because otherwise, why? They made the announcement on July 3rd. I think they felt pressured to do that just with the political, social climate. And fair enough. They could have said, look, on such and such a date, they could have pushed it out. Look, we need some time. They could lie. We've been kind of working on this for a while, but we want some time. It's a big rollout. We're going to come back August, September 1st before, or they could have just said, we'll have a new name before the season launches. But I think you want some time for your fans because no matter what they do, people are going to be unhappy and critical. And so I think they need some time. So, to wait until the season to roll it out, then you could get a lot of splash for it. But I think it's going to get a lot of attention no matter when they roll it out. And I would think they'd want some time to do an unveiling and kind of communicate it and get people at least a little comfortable with it. So when the season hits, that's behind them. It's not a distraction. I wouldn't think you'd want that to be a distraction because at that point you want to start winning games. And so I'd be curious. They're going to get a lot of publicity one way or the other, but I'd be curious to see. Let's see here. George says, if you don't have the real problems, you start looking for problems and come up with these virtue signaling problems. George, that is so insightful, so insightful. I've often said it's like when you live in a country like America, when you live in a country in Europe, in Western Europe, you're living in the first world. You have all the mods and cons. I know like income sometimes like Europe economically is a little different than the U.S. Although coming out of coronavirus, it looks like Europe's growth is going to be multiple percentages more than the U.S. Going forward for the next couple of years. But we have the luxury of a good life, of a safe life, of a sustainable life. We're well fed, we're housed, we live in relative peace and prosperity. And so then you're right, you kind of start looking around for things to be angry about. It's almost like if people had to work harder and if they had to struggle more, they would care more about what really matters than getting all wound up about what some football team's name is or some stupid statue down the road. Now, I know these things are offensive to people. I'm not saying that they shouldn't be upset about them. But I agree with you, George. I think it's like we have the luxury to be offended. We have the luxury to be upset. We have the luxury to be triggered by these stupid things. But we have those luxuries. Why? Why do we have those luxuries? Because we live in such an amazing society, respectively. And, people don't want to see that. It's almost like the more people have, the more ungrateful they become. I'm not saying that we should put up with injustices. I'm not saying that we should just keep things exactly the way they are. But why not look at what you have and say, how do we improve it a little bit versus just ripping it to shreds and being ungrateful? So Tesla News says they don't have to change their names. I agree with you there, Tesla News. But on the other hand, they don't have to not change it. I think if they are a business and they're trying to figure out how to keep things healthy and strong and moving into the future, why not change it, Not a big deal. George, it's always about money, no matter what. Sad. It is. It is always about money. But, we're talking about, let me back up a little bit. You can absolutely go watch a football game with no money involved. You can go watch, in America, a local high school match. You can get together with a bunch of friends and actually play football out in a lot somewhere. Often you can go watch a college game. Now, you're going to pay some money to get into the stadium. But they're not running the kind of money in a high school game or maybe a local league for amateurs. Maybe you're paying $2, $3 to get in. It's about money in that they're just trying to pay for the rental of the stadium, the field that they're playing on. Maybe they're trying to get a little bit of money for new helmets, new gear. But this isn't revenue generation for them. They're just enjoying it. So you can enjoy, and I know the same for soccer. You can go play and enjoy and watch soccer on amateur levels and all over the world for free. It's not about the money. It's about the passion. Once you get into professional sports, though, it does become about the money. And for as much as I love Barcelona, I'm not for a moment persuaded anything other than it's about the money for certain people. And I don't mean to say that some of the guys on the pitch, all they care about is the money. They're multimillionaires, these guys. Messi and a lot are multimillionaires, but they also love what they do and they're really good at it. And they're doing it partially for the passion, I think, and the pride and the ego that drives them. And they're always trying to overcome and beat themselves and beat their competitors. They're very competitive. But the guys running Barcelona, the guys running Real Madrid, the guys running Manchester United and Liverpool and all these other giant teams, it's about the money. For the guys in the headquarters and the head office, it's about the money. It's the money that makes the decisions. And it's really interesting. Tesla News says, it's funny because none of them had problems with the name before. There are blacks in the Washington Redskins and they don't care. Oh, that's right. And then he said, ignore that. So yeah, don't worry about that. I think lots of people didn't care, but for some reason there is a group. And I get it. If you are an American Indian, it can be offensive. The name Redskin refers to the bloody scalp of Native Americans, not African Americans. That's right. You're totally right. That is referring to American Indians. Maybe I said in my confused state African Americans, but I meant Indians. George says, you sound frustrated about like my maths high school teacher back in the day when most of the class simply didn't care. Yeah. So you're saying I sound frustrated like the world's on fire and no one will listen to me? It is frustrating to me because I've spent a lot of time in corporate America. I've spent tons of time in meetings. I've watched companies like Kodak. Kodak used to be a big client of mine back in the day. And I've just watched them through ineptitude and cowardice and hiring and empowering small-minded people that are more concerned about their own careers than what's good for the company. Make decisions and make these decisions by committee. And you watch these companies go down the tubes because a bunch of mice are at the table making the decisions. And it's too bad. A lot of people covering their rear ends, a lot of people trying to make sure that they can buy that vacation cottage that they've always wanted or put their kid in the best private university, when it comes time for them to go off to college, as opposed to saying, look, I'm going to make a bold decision. I'm going to do something creative and bold. I'm going to take a risk. And people still do that kind of stuff. But honestly, it doesn't happen like it should anymore. And so I just get the sense, like I look at the Redskins, and it's frustrating. I don't mind that they change their name. I just do it like lead. Show what you're made of. Be bold. You had such an opportunity to do something amazing. No vision, no leadership. In the great words of President Trump, sad. Ahmed the Pro says, thank you a lot. Thank you, Ahmed. Thanks for being here. I hope you stick around, but if you've got to bounce, I'm sure it's pretty late there right now, but if you've got to bounce, thanks for joining us. George says, just go back 2 to 3 generations and people in the U.S., Europe lived through real hardships. We as a society just lost touch to reality. And I think that's it. I think what happens is the success, like the hard work that those generations put in on behalf of the rest of us paid off. Like they've been able to develop or bear fruit. Like those hardworking, struggling generations create the wealth and success that we enjoy. And we don't appreciate. You see it in the nobles throughout history. Maybe a really great aristocrat or great king, builds this kingdom, or the aristocrat builds up the wealth of the family. He's a good leader. He's good to the people in the villages under his kind of umbrella, and he's created strength and harmony and peace for his people. Everyone under his kind of wings are thriving. This is when monarchy works well. A good king. You could talk about different political systems. Democracy but a good king is tough to beat. Now, bad kings are the worst. Dictators and technocrats, all these guys are the worst. But you get under a good king, it can actually be quite amazing. So it's kind of the same thing that I don't even know where I was going with all that. But the same thing is the next generation. You get this great king who builds up all this wealth and this strong land. Then you get this spoiled, rotten brat of a child that takes over, doesn't appreciate anything. He just consumes. He's a drunken womanizer. He's a gambler, and he's cruel and mean to his people. And the next, he just ruins it. And I think that's where we're at. We've had this great kind of generation or two that built something up. And not everybody here is spoiled and rotten, but you've got a bunch of spoiled, rotten ingrates that don't understand or appreciate what they have, and they're just happy to destroy it. Let's take a look here. Tesla News says, but it's the African Americans that want the name change in the first place. I don't know if that's, I think they're part of the group, but I think there's more. And let's not forget, I'm trying to be generous here saying, I don't have a problem if they change the name. But at the same time, and I didn't make this episode all about this, but at the same time, we have cultural Marxism at play. And there are people, specific people and institutions instigating race wars. The whole thing of Marxism it's founded on the concept of the Hegelian dialectic, this idea put forth by Hegel, that you have these kind of two opposing forces, and when they battle with each other, the dialectic, one against the other, out of that kind of battle, this could be a debate, it could be warring nations, it could be warring classes, but when you have that dialectic, the two kind of conversing with each other, but conversing through conflict, that something good comes out of that. And this is the whole idea that Marx kind of took and created Marxism with. It's like the class warfare. You've got to get the haves and the have-nots to battle. And out of that battle comes the Marxist utopia, the communist utopia. That's why the communists always want conflict, because out of that they can create the world that they think that they want. And of course they're stupid and they're flawed, and they don't take into consideration human nature, which is always going to create problems. You're never going to get utopia in this world, never. It'll be hell on earth. That's what it'll be. But this whole Hegelian dialectic, and so what you've got now in America is you've got income inequality, we're fighting over who has more and why is that fair. We've got intersectionality, between I'm a white male, I'm a straight white male versus a gay, transgender, lesbian, black. I mean, it's like all this identity stuff. So what's going on, this cultural Marxism is just I'm not, but these cultural Marxists just want this ongoing battle between everyone based on their identity. And so, you've got black folks saying we need to get rid of the Redskins. But you do have American Indians saying we need to get rid of the Redskins. You've got other American Indians saying, we love the Redskins, don't change it. But you've got battles based on identity, and it's just going to rip the country apart. And it's not just America. This is sweeping the world. This is not just unique to America, but it's probably, for me at least, and I think others, maybe the most visible. So Tesla News says racism will never end. That's just a known fact. It's true because mankind is flawed. You're never going to get rid of, and racism cuts across every color. I don't care what your skin color is. American Indian, red, you're a black person, you're a yellow person, you're a white person, or anything in between. Racism is in us. I'm not saying it's good. It's something we need to fight against. It's something we need to work hard to mature past, just like selfishness and gluttony and all these other things that mankind struggles with. Yeah, of course, racism is never going to go away. You can't legislate morality. You can't legislate away people's hearts. Now, you need good laws on the books because good laws make room and space for people to live in peace and to thrive. But at the end of the day, you've got to capture hearts and minds. And unfortunately, what's being captured right now is our base nature. It's the hatred. It's the, you've offended me, and so you must be undone. You must be undone. George says, I'm not sure why he threw this up, Kodak's first ever digital camera in 1975, unbelievable. So just to that point, George, I've worked with Kodak. Kodak invented digital camera technology. And I live in the city that Kodak was founded in, but they made so much money off their film business. There were just buildings after buildings after buildings. It would blow the mind if you lived here to see what. They've knocked a lot of these buildings down, but tons of buildings to process film and make film and so on. That they buried the digital camera technology because they did not want to cannibalize their film industry. They did not want to cannibalize their film revenues. And so they sat on it, which was okay, but it was stupid because the rest of the world wanted digital and ultimately got digital. And then Kodak, again, was sitting there with its hands in its pockets going, what happened? We've lost all our revenue. And now all their buildings are empty. They had to knock them down, and they're trying to figure out how to rub two quarters together for warmth. It's just pathetic. But Kodak actually invented the digital camera technology. They invented the little sensors that captures the digital image. That's Kodak. Unfortunately, they didn't know what to do with it because they just kept making money on film. Fun story, when I was a young sales guy, I actually was I used to sell to Kodak. I was in my 20s, maybe early 30s at the time. And when you make film and when you develop film, it uses silver nitrate, but it has the element silver in it. And they had a silver reclamation facility where they would reclaim the silver out of the film processing. And I got to go into the silver reclamation plant. And it was the craziest thing, high security, but they were just pallets and pallets stacked with silver ingots, silver bars, the big bars, just pallets everywhere. And it was this old, dirty, it was not a clean facility. It was like this old, rundown facility, guys kind of almost like in hazmat style suits, but it wasn't hazmat, but I think it was just, they put on these white kind of Tyvek suits or Tyvek-like. And you had to be searched, coming in and going out. You couldn't, they didn't just let you out of the facility. But I got to go in there and check that out. And that was kind of cool as a young guy. I thought if I could just back up my little Saturn, and I was driving a Saturn at the time, could I just load up my trunk? I don't think the shocks could handle it, but could I load up my trunk? It would help out a lot. Didn't happen, unfortunately, but that was that. George says to Tesla News, isn't it the MSNBC watching suburbs who think they need to be super woke about everything? And I would just say yes. I mean, we won't get too much into that, but George, I think yes. It's a lot of people trying to find an identity and trying to fit in and want to be hip to the news thing. Brian says, might need to rename the Democratic Party. Didn't they break off due to opposition of civil rights for the African Americans? Yeah, the Democratic Party actually was the party of slavery. Throughout the 1800s, the Democratic Party was the party that was actually defending slavery. They were the slave holders. It was the party of the South. Funny enough, it was the Republican Party that was inspired to end slavery. And both these parties battled with it. I mean, this is something that everybody in the country knew was going to rip the country apart. There's actually interesting documentation back in the even 1700s into the 1800s where thinkers were saying, look, this is an abomination, this slavery practice, we've got to get rid of it. But they didn't know how to do it in a way that would keep the country together. They thought if they got rid of it, we'd rip the country apart. And we did go through a civil war. But yes, the Democrats are the party of slavery, funny enough. And interestingly, I was just actually talking to a friend yesterday. We had a couple over for dinner, at both of them black people. And we were talking about it, and he said, I think the biggest issue is, and I've been saying this, it's funny, he didn't hear me say it, but I've been saying this all along. I think the biggest issue is that there are no men in the African-American, the black community. The men have been pushed out of the community. Their children are growing up without good male role models, without fathers, and this is killing us. This is killing us. And so he just made such a great point. And I just want to point out to you folks now, Lyndon Baines Johnson passed a lot of the civil rights laws. He was a Democratic president and was lauded for getting civil rights passed. But it was a lot of what Johnson passed that caused the black men to be pushed out of the family. All these welfare programs incentivized black families to not stay together. If a woman had a child and she had a man in the house, she wouldn't get the money. And so they'd get them out of the house so that they could then get the money from the government. So the Democrats were the party of slavery. And then they passed these civil rights laws that had the unintended consequence of actually further decimating the black community. And now you've got generations of blacks that have grown up without a good fathering and a good stable home. And now the Democrats come in and say, well, we'll fix it because it's the terrible racists that are causing this issue. No, a lot of the violence, a lot of the murder, a lot of the the prison numbers. Yeah, some of it is that blacks are unfairly focused on, but a lot of it, that's a minority. A lot of it is the fatherlessness in the community, and it's just so destructive. We have no idea, and that's actually starting to happen in the white community now too. Whites are growing up now fatherless the same way, and we're going to reap the whirlwind here, people, if we don't come to our senses and just admit to ourselves that a lot of these policies are destructive, and sometimes when you try to help, you end up hurting. George says, when we get ready to take the United States, we will not take it under the labels of communism. We will not take it under the label of socialism. These labels are unpleasant to the American people and have been speared too much. We will take the United States under labels we have made very lovable. We will take it under liberalism, under progressivism, under democracy, but take it we will. That was a quote from Alexander Trachtenberg, 1885 to 1966 at the National Convention of Communist Parties, Madison Square Garden, 1944. Yeah, that's that cultural Marxism that I'm talking about, bro, and it's a real thing. Hey, Pions with Zero is in the house. Willing to forego absolutes is the first step to losing hold. Down with relativism. Boy, Pions with Zero bringing a bombshell. First comment in, and he drops the hammer. The relativism's killing us, isn't it? I mean, I would agree with you, and I think the whole postmodernist movement, the postmodernism, and I grew up postmodern, not even realizing it. Like it just has kind of infiltrated and saturated our society. But this relativism is destructive. There has to be necessary truth. There has to be something that is true. There has to be things that are good and things that are bad, that are evil. You've got, and so then to do that, how do you get there? If you have a world without the transcendent, if you just have a material world, if there's nothing outside of this world that is unchanging, then how do you find good or bad? What's to say something's good? Like, if it's just the material world, what's ethical and moral? It's just survival. It's just power. It's feeding yourself, defending yourself, overcoming an enemy, taking control. What else is left? It's just winning. But if there's something transcendent, if there's a being like God who is pure and good and holy, then you're able to anchor in and say, okay, now we've got a rationale for truth. That's why Christ says, I am the truth and the way. He doesn't say, I am telling you the truth. He said, I am the truth. So that gives society something to anchor to and say, okay, this is true. This is what we know to be true. Love is good. Life is good. Human beings are bear God's image and so on. And then you can have these necessary truths, which you then start to build your society around, your culture around, and your laws around. We haven't done that. We've kind of cut ourselves free and said we'll just be relativists and we'll make our own truth. And that is the beginning of our undoing for sure. Let's keep going here. Pines with Zero says willingness. Yeah, no, I understood you. I think hopefully I read that correctly. George says you were talking about Kodak before. That's why I brought up. Yeah, no, I connected the dots after I read that, George. And Brian says that twin cam was legit. He's talking about the Saturn. It was. I think you drove it a few times, didn't you? Because you cleaned it, or I can't remember if you drove that one. But I had this little forest green twin cam Saturn. It was like a 5 or 6 speed manual. It was a great little car. A little Tupperware body. You couldn't dent it or ruin it, but it was really zippy, very sporty. I love that little car. It was a great car in the 90s today. Pines with Zero says, I can't type right today. Sorry. Pi, don't apologize. I can't talk right any day. So I'm also sorry. I'm just glad you're here, bro. He says, the Austro-Hungarians used to say that family is the foundation of state. Sometimes they were sensible, guy. Totally. And I sometimes they were sensible guys. I would love to add to that. So in America, we have embraced the idea that the individual is kind of the basic unit of the state, that the individual is the basic unit of society. And I would agree with you that the family is the basic unit. You cannot have society with an individual. But we've vaunted the individual so much in America, and we've kind of qualified or disvalued the family to such a degree that it's all about the individual satisfaction. Now you can't say, well, the tribe, you can't say this, the nation, the skin color, the ethnic background is the basic unit. You've got to look at where is the first example of society, community in mankind and in the history of mankind. And that's at the least in a marriage. When you have a man and a woman come together and commit and become one. And then when they create a third human out of that union, you've got a family. That's like the first example. That's the most basic unit of a society. And so to break society down to the individual is to atomize it, is to deconstruct it to such a point that it loses its quality and its value. But if you keep the family intact as the basic unit of society, then you realize we don't necessarily need to worry about healthy individuals. We need to worry about healthy families. And if we worry about healthy families, the individuals will be healthy. And by nature, by knock-on effect, the society, the nation will be healthy as well. But I think that there has been a purposeful move to destroy the institutions of mankind by the left, the progressive left, especially coming out of Europe. I'm going to go blank now on the school. It begins with an F. Someone will know it, but there was a school of thinking, progressives, and they wanted to essentially break down all the institutions, and family's one of them. If you can break down family, destroy it, and then reformulate it, they deconstruct everything, the deconstructionists, but that's not the school. It'll come to me later, probably after the podcast live stream. But I think that's the issue, is that you've broken down the family and other institutions like art and church, religion, so on, to such a point that society's not holding together. And then what happens? You create this kind of chaotic situation where the state comes in and says, we'll become you're all in everything. Obviously, this isn't working. We'll take over everything. We'll give you money. We'll give you food. We'll give you education. We'll give you work. And in return, you will give us yourselves, and you will become wards of the state. And that's not good for mankind. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but this is the direction we're going in. We're going to have to resist this. This is the direction. You can put your head in the sand, but this is how can you ignore it? This is what's happening. Pines Zero says, Mike, we may disagree on the Bible, but I read it a couple of times, and it fundamentally is about living aligned with an ideal. Great foundation for non-relativistic values. I would agree. Like you don't, and Pines Zero, you get a prize, the Frankfurt School. Thank you. Yes, that's it, the Frankfurt School. That is kind of this school of thinking where a lot of Europeans came to the U.S. and also stayed in Europe. And this idea of deconstructing, decomposing all the institutions so that we can then break it all down and recreate what they think is a progressive, idyllic state, this progressive utopia. And it's terrible, terrible stuff. But I would agree, yes. Even if you don't agree with Christianity, even if you don't agree with the Bible, holding on to that as a foundation, anchor for society, I mean, you couldn't do better. I mean, it's a fantastic. You've got to have some understanding of the transcendent. I mean, whether you agree with me that Christ is the Son of God, whether Christ is the Savior of mankind, that he's God become flesh, and all that, whether you agree or not, you've got to have some understanding of the transcendent to have necessary truth, to have good and evil. Otherwise, you're stuck in relativism because it's just a naturalistic world. But that's a whole philosophical discussion. George says, looking at Brian's picture, the Gastin family seems to really into high-quality beards. Yes. I've had a beard for many, many years, like decades. But I went out to. I hope Brian's still on here. I went out to Maine for a vacation years ago, and Brian had this like really thick beard, and it inspired me to let mine grow out. And that was a few years ago, and I've done that. So yeah, so Brian gets credit. Although I've had a beard probably longer than he has, I think. I don't know. It doesn't matter. We're about 11 years apart. I'm 11 years older. I'm the elder, and Brian's the youngest in the family. But we bookend. We're the two boys that bookend the family. But he's had some magnificent beards and mustaches through the years, and it's been a bit of an inspiration to me. Dale Spoonley, hey, welcome. He says, hey, Mike. Dale, I think you hail from Ireland, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. Dale says, we are raising a generation of snowflakes. That's the truth. We really are. And then Brian says, a prize, Pablo cell. See, now I'm not, Pablo's cell phone. You want the Fold 2? Is that the prize you want? Brian wants the Fold 2. Tesla says to Spoonley, facts. Tesla News says, except I'm 13 and I'm not a snowflake. And see, Tesla News, you are the hope of our future. The key is if we have parents, and I don't know if you've got great parents or you're just not a snowflake on your own or how this is working for you, Tesla News, but if we have generations, if we have people within these generations coming up that can understand the truth, that they're not brainwashed, they're willing to look at life through the lens of reality, be honest, intellectually honest with themselves, intellectually honest about what they see around them, and willing to deal with the facts as they are and say, look, I'm going to take responsibility for myself. I'm not going to sit here and cry like a baby. Hey, part of life is failure. Part of life is pain. Part of life is not getting what you want. That's actually good for you. When you don't get what you want, it forces you to become a better person. Your roots get deeper. Your trunk gets stronger. Your leaves, they stretch out more green for the sun and the rain. You become a better tree, to take that metaphor all the way. But you need some opposition in life. You need some heartache in life. I don't want people to be destroyed. I'm not saying like you should just go to the depths of hell if you want to become the best person you can be. No. But you shouldn't be coddled. I don't want to be coddled. I'm glad when God brings some opposition into my life, and I'm not saying like he does bad things, but like when he allows stuff to happen to me, I'm not one of these Christians that runs around and goes, well, if I serve God, everything's going to be great for me. No, that's not how it works. I don't want hardship. I don't want to be hurt. I don't want to have things happen that break my heart. But on the other hand, when those things are allowed into my life, I look at them as like, this is an opportunity for me to grow. This is an opportunity for me to become more significant, to get broader shoulders, to get a stronger back, to see the world a little differently than I saw it before. Nobody wants hardship. Nobody wants pain and heartache. But on the other hand, we need some of that in our lives. And, as parents, you want to do the best you can to protect your children, but you can protect them so much that they become useless. And that goes back to my example of, like a king with a kingdom, and he's sitting there running this place and it's doing really great. But his son, on the other hand, is a lout. The guy takes over and that's because the father didn't serve the son well. He didn't make the son endure hardship and cause his son to become strong. So there's that. So good for you. Brian says that he was born full bearded. Well, I was there. I wasn't in the room, but I saw you when they brought you home. I don't remember that necessarily, but I'll just no vote on that one. I'll just say, look, I'll retract any comments on that and just let that one sit. Brian was born full bearded. Pines with Zero says, what you do is that you take a part of what has happened and build something new from that. That's right. You don't throw away the past is what I hear you saying. You don't throw away the past. Maybe you take it, synthesize it, make it better. You can iterate, you can modify, you can change, but you don't burn it to the ground. You don't destroy it. You have something valuable. It's like saying, I've got this piece of gold. It's so valuable, but I'm so offended by it. I'm offended by this gold, but I want to be wealthy. So I'm going to get rid of this offensive gold so that I can be wealthy. It's like, it's nonsensical. He also says, nurse, looking at the sex of the baby, guessing by the beard, it's a boy. That's probably totally what happened. Totally what happened. And Dale says, great memory, Mike. Hello from Ireland. Yeah, see, I remember you, my friend. I remember. Great to have you along. Hopefully things are beautiful in Ireland. Here in the northeastern U.S., we're just having a gorgeous summer. Hot, but not too humid. Hot and dry, lots of sun. A little bit of rain here and there to keep the grass green and the tomato plants growing. But we're doing all right. Our cities are on fire, and we're at each other's throats, but boy, what a beautiful summer we're having. Oh, so I hope things are great in Ireland. We get some laughs and smiles from Tesla News. So guys, that's about it. I don't know if you guys have other questions. I'm happy to hang around a little bit longer, but that's kind of what was on my mind today. I'd be curious to know what you guys think of all this stuff. Pines with Zero says, Mike, quite a European gang you got there. But this is the thing, Pi. And it's funny because I've recognized that a lot of people that jump on the live stream are European. And so that's why I choose the time I do, because I'm trying to accommodate my European, my Middle Eastern, and even South American friends. Because here's the thing. If I were to do this for a U.S. audience, I would actually do it later in the day. So I start this podcast at 4 o'clock in the afternoon on a Sunday. For me, that's an awkward time. It's like still prime hours for the weekend. But if I go too late, you guys are all asleep. And I want to make sure that you can jump in and have some fun. And I love you guys. Like, I love conversing with you. So I do this a little bit early for the U.S., but it should be a good time for Europe and the like. And so, yeah, I think that's partially why I've got such a great European audience. I wish I could get more folks from the U.S. to join. And I think as the weather changes and we're inside earlier, like it gets colder here and dark earlier, I think we'll see more people join that are from the U.S. Tesla News is from Utah. Oh, awesome. So you're kind of out towards the west, my friend. George says, in 2020, this nurse gets fired for even guessing the sex of a baby. That's right. That's right. And God help you if you use a pronoun. If you use the wrong pronoun, the mother might get triggered on the table as she just delivers the baby. Pauline's back. She says, prime time for me. Yeah, because, well, so she's saying that her kids nap in the afternoon lots. Okay, and you're on the west coast, I believe, of Canada, out Calgary or Alberta way or something like that. So George says, yeah, it's almost midnight in Europe, 23:27. So it's pretty late for you. And Ahmed the Pro says it's 1 a.m. in the United Arab Emirates. I mean, this is the thing. I could do it even earlier, couldn't I? It means a lot to me. And Ahmed the Pro says, but it's worth every minute. See, that's the kindest thing. I'm just so grateful for you guys. And that's why I do this. I'd like to do more impromptu. I don't know if you guys are up for that, but sometimes I just want to do an impromptu live stream and just like throw on the camera and just chit chat. I haven't done that too much, but I am tempted. And I guess I wouldn't brand that the currency. That might just be a throwaway live stream. Dale Spoonley says, our past shapes our futures, so why try and erase it? Exactly. And I think to add to that, Dale, and I think as being Irish, you can appreciate this, you know, our past, like our identity, our past informs our identity. And I know like the Irish people, not unique, I mean, but they particularly they're proud of their identity. You know, the stories, where you come from, your family, some of the sorrows that you've gone through, some of the joys that you've gone through. Like our past is critical. It's part of who we are. And there are aspects of our identity that might be shameful, but that doesn't necessarily have to mean that we should be ashamed of our past. I mean, we should embrace it and go, look, and not all of it's good. Like I would imagine if you were German coming out of World War II, you were ashamed of that. But like we don't hold the Germans, we don't call every German a Nazi. We don't make them pay for it. It's like they've moved on, but it's part of their heritage. It's who they are and what happened there. And I think it's instructive. It's like, okay, you shouldn't be proud of it. On the other hand, you can learn from it. And what's better than someone learning from their past and their mistakes? When you erase all that, you strip people of the ability to learn from their past, but even more dangerously, you strip them of their identity. And when you strip a people of their identity, they're just searching for any identity. They're looking for something to belong to. And that's where revolutions and these movements happen, because people have been stripped of their identity. They've been taught that they should hate the other, and they're just looking for something to be a part of. And boy, it's a mess. If I were in charge around here, I would shut down the public schools. 95% of Americans are educated in state-run schools. I'd shut those down because they're toxic. Hey, Brian's got to bounce. See you, buddy. Thanks for joining. Look forward to seeing you when you hit Rochester. I have to have you over to Gastin Manor, and we'll have a soda pop together. And then Pines with Zero says, Ahmed is the chrono OG. He absolutely is. Ahmed is so right. It really is worth every minute. Thank you, George, and thank you, Ahmed. I appreciate that. Tesla News says, I'm in South Dakota right now because they aren't freaking out about coronavirus, and there are tons of people here, and there's still not many cases here at all. Yeah, I'm sitting here in New York State, which is freaking out about coronavirus, and it makes you think I just should move to another state if it were that easy. And then GFG says, cheese lives matter. GFG, welcome. I don't think this might be the first time I've seen you in the comments here on the podcast and the live stream. Thank you. Cheese lives matter. Why have I heard that before? What does that remind me of? Cheese lives matter. Thanks for chiming in there. And do you have a cheese that you particularly care for, GFG? I'd be curious to know what your favorite cheese is. I'm kind of fond of a number of cheeses, quite frankly. George says, Joe Rogan, join Rogan and move to Texas. Well, we've talked about it. Look, here's the thing. I would move, but I have family here, mother, one sibling is here. I wouldn't stay just, for a sibling, nothing against my sibling, but my mother's here. My business is kind of based here, although I do have clients that are outside of New York, but I'm kind of, I have employees here, my business is here. I could do it, there's no question, but it would take a lot of work. It would be pretty disruptive. And so kind of what I'm doing is what I've accused the Redskins of not doing. I'm kind of planning out. I'm planning more of a long-term so that I'm ready to do it. We're putting things in place, finances, business house, so on, so that we can pull the trigger when we need to. And we're pushing out a little bit just so that we can do it on our own terms as opposed to just scrambling and trying to get out of here. So we'll definitely be out of New York at some point, God willing. But we're doing it kind of phased over time as opposed to just pulling up and hitting the road. So Tesla News says Blue Lives Matter. Yeah, they do. Stand for the flag or kneel for the cross. There you go. Yeah. Pauline says, every state has problems, I imagine. Texas gets hurricanes. No? Yeah, they do get hurricanes on the coast. It's also hot as hell down there. There's a lot of desert and dust. Austin is a pretty cool cultural city, but very liberal. And the rest of the state tends to be more conservative. Yeah, you're not going to find perfection. If you want perfect weather and all that, you got to move to California. But California is a progressive hell, and it's wall-to-wall people. But Brinza is probably the best cheese. Is it available in the U.S.? I'm not familiar with Brinza, quite frankly, pie. I don't know that cheese very well, and I do enjoy my cheeses, but I don't know that one. Well, guys, I can't believe that we're almost through July. Where's this year gone? And it's weird. It's like the year's going by fast, but at the same time, it's not been a good year for most people. Tesla News says Californians don't know how to drive. Well, that's As a New Yorker, I feel like every state I go to, they don't know how to drive. They're either too slow or they're in the passing lane, or, Massachusetts are the worst. In New York, we refer to Massachusetts drivers as massholes. When you see someone with Massachusetts plates, they drive like a masshole. Imagine that, like a New Yorker telling somebody else they're a bad driver. GFG says, Pepperjack. Mike, what would you say your political spectrum is? What is my political spectrum? So I would say politically, I am a conservative. Now, when I say conservative, and this is the thing with terms these days, it's like you got to qualify everything. Conservative doesn't necessarily mean Trump supporter, although I did vote for Trump. I find Trump's personality difficult at times. Sometimes I wish he'd shut his mouth. But for me, Trump is a populist. But I like a lot of the policies that have come out of the administration. I think that the Trump administration has tried to and has accomplished some good things. Okay, I'll give you that. I like the fact that Trump is an outsider, et cetera, but I'm not a Trumpian Republican. So I'm registered as a Republican, but I'm a conservative. And when I say conservative, I'm talking about Sir Edmund Burke conservative, like 1700s conservative. I believe in some of the foundational principles of conservatism, that the universe is ruled by a king, and that the rest of the world should reflect that reality, that our societies, our families, our governments, our culture should be brought into order to reflect the transcendent reality of a king on a throne, that there's a right way to live, and that mankind, through thousands of years of trial and error, has developed traditions that are good and right, and that allow us to flourish. It's not about dominion. It's about how do you find human flourishing? And I find that the conservative approach, conserving the older ways, is the way towards human flourishing. And you can get into all kinds of discussions around that, but just to kind of give you a little bit of a background, that's kind of me. Now, I tend to vote right wing. I'm anti-progressivism. I'm anti-liberalism. I'm not anti-free markets. I mean, there's like the idea of liberalism, meaning like post-enlightenment liberal, like, people should be free. They should have the ability to live the life that they see fit living, that you should have pluralistic societies, and that there should be rule of law and free markets and so on. I mean, I'm fine with that kind of liberalism, but this kind of hyper-liberalism, this progressivism, it's a cancer, and it's destroying mankind. It really is. But that's me. I'm free market, conservative, socially conservative, politically conservative, and free market guy. Does that help? I'm not big on publicly traded companies. Like when I say free market, I'm not saying like all business is good business. I think some of these giant, and you may have missed it earlier, I talked about corporatism, but these giant corporations that become nations and governments unto themselves and work hand in hand with the government to implement progressive social policies are also destructive and not good. So that's that. So Pines and Zero says, if I'm in the U.S., I will bring you some. Well, if you are in the U.S., I will gladly provide the table, the wine, the beer, whatever. I will provide everything if you bring the cheese. And even if you didn't bring the cheese, it'd be great to see you. It'd be great to do a meetup sometime. I don't know how we do that. It'd be great to do a meetup. Maybe if I become a billionaire, I'll just fly everybody into my private island. Although that sounds a little bit like Jeffrey Epstein, so let's not go there. Oh, let's see here. GFG says, amen. I don't know if you're saying amen to what I was saying, but Tesla News, yes, Trump needs to shut up. He's a good president, not so much of a great person. Yeah, agreed. And that's the thing, like, who's been a great person all their life? Trump's kind of singular in his bombastic personality. He's larger than life and all that, but he knows what he's doing. I'm not one of these guys that thinks that Trump's a genius. That whole Q crowd that's like, he's a genius and just wait, and he's outfoxing everyone. I think Trump's really cunning. I think he's crafty. But I don't think Trump's like on a different stratosphere than the average human being. I think he's really smart, but I don't think he's on a God level of brain power. But I think the guy's really good at what he does, and I think he creates chaos on purpose because it's that whole OODA loop. I think he creates chaos to disorient his enemies, and he's able to do things. And I respect him for that. And yeah, so George says, did Trump do anything the last 4 years besides lowering taxes, tweeting, and drinking Diet Coke? George, you say that like that's not enough. You don't think that that's enough? That's what America needed. He needed to lower taxes, tweet, and drink Diet Coke. That's what we needed, and we have the hero that America needs. Yeah, he's done a lot, actually. Prison reform. He's done a lot of deregulation. there's been a ton of stuff. You just can't see it or hear it because the way he's portrayed in the media, you wouldn't know anything. Good way to sum it up. Thank you, GFG. I appreciate it. And then Tesla news is more than you think, George. And that's true. There's just so much that he's done. And he's done a good job of trying to take power out of the administrative state and put it back to where it belongs constitutionally with Congress and so on. So there are things that the administrative state has been given power over because Congress didn't want to deal with it, or even executive orders like the Obama administration with the DACA situation, where Trump has undone a lot of that stuff and said to Congress, look, it's your job to create these solutions. This is not supposed to be handed off to the administrative state. These are not supposed to be solved by executive orders. He's undone a lot of that. And then, the news screams that he's a racist, but what he's trying to do is get things more constitutionally organized. At least that's what I think he's trying to do based on probably what he's been advised. Pines for Zero says, so you're a Do Rex, a Rege Lex conservative. Got it. So I'm not a good Latin reader, but I know Rex is king. I am kind of a monarchist, quite frankly. And I came to this through a strange kind of epiphany. So as you guys know, because I talk about I'm a Christian, and American Christians were really big on like democracy and freedom, and America's got the best form of government. God gave us this government. And I want to be careful. I'm not against that type of thinking. But it occurred to me that Scripture teaches that Jesus is a king. We call him Lord, we call him King, Master. And he's going to come back someday, it's very clear, and establish his throne on earth, the New Jerusalem, and that he will reign forever, this amazing, beautiful reign. And that his kingdom is now, ever since he died and rose from the dead, his kingdom has come to reality, at fruition, but it is and is yet to come. And each Christian is obligated to try to live out the reality of his kingdom in this fallen world in hopes while they wait for his kingdom to come and materialize and be established. And so I realized, I'm actually a monarchist. Now, I'm not saying, I want to overthrow the American government and establish a throne. I'm not saying that necessarily. But I realized that we've been kind of taught in America, monarchy's bad. America had to break away from the bad King George, and the kings were bad. And yeah, you get bad kings, no doubt. Taxation without representation, which we have now without a king. But that if you have a righteous king, that people flourish, and that ultimate righteous king is Christ. That's what Scripture teaches. So I'm a monarchist, and I don't know if I saw Rex in there, so I'm assuming that's about the king. But yeah, I'm a monarchist, conservative. Dale Spoonley, hey Mike, what's your thoughts on Trump's new attack angle on mental health of Joe Biden? Dale, I think that it's. I hate to see it happen, just because. Here's what I really think. I think that Joe Biden is struggling. I think I have. I work in some senior care. I have some clients in the senior care business. I think that Biden's struggling with some early onset dementia. And I don't mean dementia like he's crazy, but I think Biden's struggling with cognition issues. He's having trouble thinking. He's having trouble getting words out. You'd think that I have the same issue. He says funny, strange things at times. I think that the people that are around an elderly individual that's struggling with that are obligated to try to protect that person. They're obligated to say it's not right for dad to be out in this situation. His cognition isn't there. He's going to be taken advantage of. It's not fair to put something on this person. And I think that Biden has real cognition issues. I think it's just he's had some brain injuries when he was younger. He is quite older, as is Trump. And I think these things are catching up to him. So I don't like that Trump's attacking him on that, but quite frankly, I think he kind of has to. Not to be nasty, but I think this is a real issue. I think that Biden is an unfit candidate. And shame on the Democrats and shame on the people around Joe Biden for putting him out there. I don't think it's fair to him. I don't think that Joe Biden has the cognition to really deal with this. And I think we're going to see it when the debates happen. I think Trump is going to savage Biden, and it's going to be an unfair fight. It's going to be one of those things where you're going to look and go, "Oh, that's painful." But on the other hand, Trump has to play to win, and so I don't like it only because it's ugly, and I think that Joe Biden needs to be protected by his own people, meaning they need to get him out of this situation. It's not right. But on the other hand, I think that the die is cast, and we're going to have to see this thing play itself out. It's going to be kind of ugly. Let's see. Tesla News wants to know, if you can get the virus twice, then what's the point in a vaccine? Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been tracking that. I wouldn't take the vaccine anyway because it's just hard to trust. Like if it's gone through so quickly, is it safe? So on. Pines Zero says, it's the James I quote, God gives a king and a king gives the people the law. Yeah, there you go. The book of James, very good. Yeah, I guess I'm that kind of conservative. Look, I'm not wanting a theocracy. I'm not saying like turn America into a theocracy. I like that we're a pluralistic nation. I believe that, being a republic is healthy. And I don't think that we have to have a monarchy in America now. I mean, look, I'm saying Christ is coming back to reign. But you could have a kind of aristocracy where you could have elected officials, but you do have a class of people, and this is what the Senate was supposed to be, more of an aristocracy where they're spending time thinking about what's good for society. They're above the fray. They're not just giving in to the whims of the people. I think true democracy is scary. The majority rules is terrifying because if you're in the minority, you have no voice. If you lose, you have no voice. Now, it's one thing to say, well, my guy won the election. Okay, every 4 years, there's another opportunity for somebody else to win. But when the mob just decides that you're not allowed to conduct business anymore, when the mob decides you can't work in your job because of your beliefs anymore, when the mob decides you can't call your sports team whatever you want to call it anymore, the mob is just ruling, and that's not healthy. That's actually terrifying. It doesn't protect, democracy does not protect the rights of the minority. You have to have some checks and balances, and that's why a republic is actually safer, or a monarchy can also protect the rights of a minority. But when you've got a democracy like the People's Republic of Czechoslovakia, when you've got the People's, which doesn't exist anymore, but the People's Republic of China and all these different People's Republics, or America that's now becoming this true democracy, the mob rules and the average person gets ground down. They could just get ground down. Their will is obliviated into the will of the state, into the will of the mob. Whew. GFG, he says, my monarch is God. There you go. And then GFG says, Egger 2052, make America godly again. I don't know anything about that, GFG. I don't know what that means. I could look it up later, I guess. George, this is becoming a little bit too religious for European standards. George, are you going to bounce on me? Are you saying you're out? This is too much? I'm sorry, you guys keep asking me these kinds of questions. I hope I'm not offending your European sensibilities. GFG, do you think that the generation of Israel is beginning as in 1948 is the generation that won't pass before the coming of Israel? Yeah, I don't know. That's that end time stuff. I'm not going to try to tackle that one. That's above my pay grade, GFG, so I don't know. That's a tough call. Half the time, Biden doesn't even remember his own name. This is Tesla News, and if he wasn't losing his mind, he probably would have been a fight with Trump. Yeah, I just don't think the guy's got it. Dale Spoonley says, so 4 more years? Here's what I think. I was actually asking some friends the other day, we were having a beer together. And yeah, I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen for Trump. I think he's going to be on the ropes. And they said they think that he's going to win resoundingly because of the silent majority. He said they were saying like a lot of people are watching the news as the leftists and the progressives are ripping down statues and burning cities. And they're not saying anything. They're not putting signs on their porch. They're keeping their mouth shut, but they're going to go, they're motivated, this person thinks, to go to the ballot box and vote for Trump because they're kind of looking at this going, my gosh, the world's going crazy and Trump's our only hope. I'm curious to see. I don't know. I mean, I thought that was a good insight, but I'm curious to see where that goes. Pines of Zero, constitutional monarchy is a decent system. It avoids the pitfalls of the sort of degenerative cycle of democracy the Greeks were worried about. I agree 100%. George says, no, I am still here. I think you were teasing me a little bit, George. I'm not trying to be religious, but if you guys ask me questions about what I believe, I'm not trying to force it down your throat. And I know European standards, it's, we don't talk about those things, but hey, this is YouTube and it's a podcast, and why not? Did I just click on the wrong one? Johnny Ascari, welcome, Johnny. He says, Trump is steeped in corruption, a puppet of the Zionists. Johnny... yeah, I don't know, Johnny. Is he really a puppet of the Zionists? I mean, it just sounds so funny. I don't know, dude. Maybe. I don't know if Trump's a puppet of anybody besides his own urges. George, Biden will do no debates with Trump is fumbling the ball on Corona. Yeah, Trump is fumbling the ball a little bit. I'll give you that. There's no question. I don't think Trump's hitting home runs with that stuff for sure. It's just curious, though. I mean, Biden is just so... I don't get it. That's the best they could do. Johnny Ascari says Biden can remember where he was 5 minutes ago. I think you meant can't. You mean he can't remember where he was? Either way. And then Pines with Zero says, as a member of the most atheistic European country, I grant thee the Jesus pass. Thank you. I got the Jesus pass. Look at that. Oh, it only took what? How many hours are we in here? 1 hour and 49 minutes. I got the Jesus pass. Thank you, Pi. You're very generous. And I will have to afford you the same kindness as you put forth your ideas as well. I wish, if any of you guys have your own channels or live streams, make sure to let me know, because it'd be fun to check your content out too. Dale Spoonley says, hey, Americans are Europeans that traveled. That's exactly it. Dale, do you know what my mother's maiden name is? Do you know my mother's, and maybe I told you this already, my mother's maiden name is Hallahan. Hallahan. I think from County Cork, but don't quote me on that. It might not be County Cork, but yeah, Hallahan. So go figure, half Lebanese and pretty much half Irish. I don't, the joke is half Lebanese, half Irish. I'm angry all the time, but too drunk to know why. All right. And now GFG is asking the hardcore, do you think Islam is a religion of war or peace? Sorry, George. I like religious stuff. Yeah. I think it's a violent religion. And if you look at how it's spread, I don't think that every Muslim is violent. I mean, I know a lot of Muslims that are just not violent. And they're not sitting there reading the Quran saying, like, I'm going to take this word for word. Just like in Christianity, you get different kind of layers and levels and approaches to the faith. But if you look at how Islam has spread, it was not spreading through evangelism. Even now, it's spread through military conquest. And so, yeah, I you know, what can I say? I don't want to get too deep into that just because of the topic, but Tesla News, well, it's not like Trump's a medical expert. Yeah, no doubt. And GFG, he agrees entirely. Guys, it's been a great conversation. You know, I'm almost at the 2-hour mark. I probably need to wrap things up here, but I've really enjoyed this conversation. So thank you for joining me today. And hopefully you got something out of it. I appreciate your time, and really this community is kind of cool. I wish, I mean, honestly, I wish I could do this all the time. It's just so much fun to get in front of the camera and talk to you guys. And one of the things that I've been working on, I've been trying to get more disciplined about creating content. So I've instituted a writing regimen that's working for me, which means I can write more scripts and articles and that type of thing. I've actually created a content calendar to keep me on track so that I'm able to actually ship more. So look for maybe an increase just in more static videos that go to the channel, not just live streams, but I've got some stuff queued up that I'll be publishing out there as well that you can check out, you know, more like the 5, 10, 15-minute video as opposed to the 2-hour live stream. Guys, I love you all. I'm really grateful for your time, and I hope you have a great week. I'll catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.